I just spent 2.5 months driving across Canada, from Cape Spear, Newfoundland, all the way to Tofino, British Columbia. And some of what I found generally surprised me. Here are 10 things I uncovered about this country on that trip. After more than 2 decades of living overseas, I got this question a lot. What is Canadian food? And every time I wasn't sure how to answer. Because think about it. Someone asks about Italian food, you know exactly what to say. Japanese food, Indian food, instant answers. But Canadian food? I didn't have one. It wasn't until I drove across the country that I finally understood. Canada doesn't really have one national dish. What it has is a bunch of regional ones. And once I saw that, the whole trip started making a lot more sense. Newfoundland, moose burger, genuinely delicious. Halifax, the donair. Finally tried it, lived up to the hype, no question. New Brunswick, cinnamon buns. PEI, ice cream. Then Quebec. And honestly, this might be the culinary heart of the whole country. Gaspé shrimp baguettes, shrimp poutine, Montreal smoked meat, some of the best bagels of my life. Every single stop, the food just kept getting better and better. Then there's the food scene in Toronto. Grab a famous pea-meal bacon sandwich at St. Lawrence Market. Head over to Kensington Market for some delicious Chinese food, or one of my personal favorites, a Jamaican beef patty. Manitoba, pierogies. Saskatoon, berries. Alberta, steaks. BC, fruit. And I ended the whole trip in Tofino with, of all things, a fish taco. Simple, and maybe my favorite meal of the entire 2.5 months. So, what is Canadian food? Honestly, I don't think there's just one answer. It's not a single dish, it's the regions. It's the people who brought their food here and never let it go. Driving across this country, one thing kept hitting me. How many different peoples actually built this place. Indigenous peoples were here for thousands of years, before anyone else showed up. Completely different nations, completely different cultures, depending on where you were. This land had a lot going on, long before anyone crossed an ocean to get here. Then the Vikings landed, briefly, in Newfoundland, 1,000 years ago. I actually went and stood on the spot myself, Lanzo Meadows. And then they just left. Then in 1497, an Italian sailor, Giovanni Caboto, sailing for the English, became the first European to reach these shores since the Vikings. It wasn't until centuries later that Europeans really came to stay. And the French got here first, especially in parts of the Maritimes and Quebec. The French didn't just settle the coast either. They pushed deep into the interior, further than anyone else at the time. And since it was mostly men making those journeys, they came into regular contact with indigenous communities. Out of that came an entirely new people, the Métis. Eventually the French and British ended up in a straight-up fight for the continent. The British won a decisive battle at the Plains of Abraham in 1759, Montreal surrendered a year later, and by 1763, Britain controlled all of New France. And by the time Canada actually became a country, that mix was baked right into the symbolism. English, Scottish, Irish, French. It's literally stitched into the country's own coat of arms. For a long stretch, those were the people in the biggest numbers. The real founders of the institutions we still live inside today. Now, Black Canadians showed up earlier than most people think too. Loyalists coming north after the American Revolution back in 1776. Through the 1800s, the waves kept coming. Italians, Ukrainians, Poles, Germans, big groups, mostly out of Europe, but also smaller numbers from Asia, including Chinese and Japanese. Following World War II, Canada remained overwhelmingly European, but things began to shift. In the late 60s and early 70s, the Canadian government changed its immigration policy, ending race-based restrictions and introducing a point system that selected newcomers based on skills and education. That's when the floodgates really opened. The 1970s brought a new wave, Indian and Caribbean immigrants arriving in much larger numbers than ever before. And yet, even by 1981, Canada remained overwhelmingly European. But in the years that followed, Canada's demographic makeup changed fast. Today, over 30% of its citizens identify as a visible minority. Nobody sent me a memo, it just happened. Canada may have started with a fixed Anglo-French identity, but since the late 1800s, it's just been one long, ongoing experiment, and so far, despite its challenges, it's still going. I've traveled to over 60 countries and visited hundreds of cities along the way. And right off the bat, I have to say, many of Canada's cities are world-class. Impressive, bold, beautiful. The maritime cities, St. John's, Sydney, Halifax, Fredericton, Moncton, and Charlottetown, all of them tied closely to the water, and honestly, feel like distant cousins to the British Isles across the Atlantic. Crossing into Quebec, I entered Quebec City, an absolute jewel, not just of Canada, of the entire continent. A spectacular city, with incredible history lining its streets and parks. Montreal was my favorite city in Canada, the city that tried to play at the level of New York, London, Paris, and Tokyo. Didn't quite get there, but I applaud the effort. Ottawa, our nation's capital, easily one of the most beautiful national capitals on the planet. Toronto ranges from millionaire castles to island parks with incredible views. Just roaming around the city is fun on its own. Winnipeg is where I grew up. Always good to be back. Regina and Saskatoon each have their own charm. Great for a couple days stay. Edmonton had a downtown that was grandiose, but oddly empty. Calgary wasn't empty at all. An awesome looking skyline, plus an incredible river park system. Great for a bike ride. And finally, Vancouver and Victoria. While Montreal is still my favorite city, Vancouver is the place I'd most want to live. Jaw-dropping, a beautiful city. And Victoria, on a warm, sunny summer day, by the water, is a visual feast on the eyes. While I'm definitely a city guy, I also really appreciate the small towns scattered across Canada. I traveled across the country, from east to west. After leaving St. John's, I passed through the towns of Dildo, Gander, and Rocky Harbour, before crossing the Cabot Strait to Nova Scotia. Peggy's Cove, just outside of Halifax, was an absolute jewel. Sackville, New Brunswick. Quiet streets, beautiful scenery. And Cavendish on Prince Edward Island with its delightful little amusement park, each left a lasting impression. Entering Quebec, I spent a night in the seaside town of Pierce, where the views across the Gulf of St. Lawrence were simply unforgettable. Crossing the Canadian Shield, I passed through a string of memorable northern towns. Sudbury with its murals, Sault Ste. Marie with its historic canal, Wawa with its giant goose, Thunder Bay, and Kenora, home to Husky the Muskie, overlooking the waterfront. And across the prairies, Manitoba and Saskatchewan were dotted with welcoming farming towns, each with their own personality, and surrounded by some of the most beautiful landscapes in the country. Then came Banff, Alberta, perhaps the most beautiful mountain town in Canada. It costs an arm and a leg to stay there, but it's worth it. British Columbia's Kootenay region felt like stepping back in time. Places like New Denver and Silverton, nestled between the mountains, looked as though they've been lifted straight from a Hollywood film set. And finally, my journey ended in Tofino. If I had to choose just one favorite town in all of Canada, this would probably be it. Set between the rainforest and the Pacific Ocean, it's one of the most beautiful places I've ever visited. Canada's cities may get most of the attention, but it's in the small towns where you'll find the friendliest people and a feeling that's about as authentically Canadian as it gets. There were a lot of positives I saw during my trip across Canada, but I do have to mention one issue that stood out for me during my travels: homelessness and visible drug use. What surprised me most wasn't simply the existence of the problem, it was how unevenly it was spread across the country. Some places had very little of it, while others seemed overwhelmed. Starting out in the Maritimes, I could spend an entire day walking around downtown St. John's or Halifax and only encounter a handful of people living on the streets. It made those cities feel clean, safe, and welcoming, both during the day and night. When I arrived in Quebec, I expected the problem to become more noticeable. Instead, I found much of the same thing. Compared to many other parts of the country, there was remarkably little visible homelessness or open drug use. I can't say exactly why, but the contrast was striking. It wasn't until I reached Ottawa that I began to notice a more visible homeless population, which surprised me given that it's the nation's capital. Toronto had more as well, but it was Sudbury that really caught me off guard. For a city of its size, the number of people struggling on the streets was much bigger than I expected. Crossing the Canadian Shield and entering the prairies, I found parts of downtown Winnipeg particularly concerning. It was a problem I remembered seeing more than 20 years ago before I left Canada, but it now appeared to have grown significantly. Regina seemed comparatively quiet, while Saskatoon had some visible issues around the riverfront parks. Edmonton also had noticeable pockets of homelessness in its downtown, and to my surprise, I saw similar scenes in parts of downtown Calgary as well. Crossing the Rockies, I arrived on the west coast. Vancouver had, by far, the largest visible homeless population I encountered anywhere on my trip, particularly in the downtown east side. The scale of it was shocking, especially considering how prosperous much of the city is. The reasons are undoubtedly complex, but the contrast with many other Canadian cities was impossible to ignore. Victoria also had noticeable stretches of homelessness in its downtown. It was another surprising sight, given how beautiful and well kept so much of the city is. Another issue that really stood out to me was cannabis. 20 years ago, before I left Canada, cannabis was still illegal. Possessing or using it could still land you in serious legal trouble. At the same time, many people I knew, including friends and family, never viewed cannabis in the same category as harder drugs. While some cities, particularly Vancouver and Toronto, had developed a reputation for being more relaxed about cannabis, it was still illegal across the country. And thousands of Canadians ended up with criminal records for possessing a substance that many people didn't consider especially dangerous. Then, Canada changed. In 2018, the federal government legalized recreational cannabis nationwide. Coming back after nearly 2 decades away, it was fascinating to see just how completely the country had adapted. Cannabis stores were everywhere, in the middle of big cities, in suburban shopping plazas, and even in small towns. But I couldn't help thinking about all the years that the people were arrested, charged, or given criminal records for something that is now sold openly, under government regulation. That contradiction is difficult to ignore. For me, the biggest change wasn't simply that cannabis became legal. It was watching something that had once been treated as a serious crime become almost completely ordinary. Whether someone agrees with legalization or not, it's one of the biggest social changes Canada has undergone in the past 20 years. Speaking of social change, another thing that was impossible not to notice was the prominence of pride flags across Canada. As someone who spent the first 2 decades of my life growing up in Canada, before living overseas for the next 20, returning home almost felt like stepping into a time machine. I hadn't lived through many of the country's social changes. I simply came back and saw the results. My journey began on the East Coast at the beginning of June, during Pride Month. Almost immediately, I noticed pride flags and symbols at several national historic sites, often displayed alongside the Canadian flag. From painted rainbow intersections in prominent city locations, to a wide range of public spaces, including, to my surprise, churches. The symbols were hard to miss. I've always found flags interesting. They're never just decoration. Governments choose them on purpose. At their core, they're symbols of identity, but also of authority and power. When a flag flies in a public space, especially alongside the national flag, it isn't neutral. It signals what that place or that institution wants to be seen endorsing. Seeing pride flags displayed so prominently made me wonder, was this simply about inclusion? Or was it also a statement about power, about which values society and its institutions now choose to represent? I noticed something similar in New Zealand, Australia, England, and the United States. Whether that's a pattern specific to Anglo societies or something broader, I don't know. But it was hard to miss. And it's another one of the most striking cultural changes I noticed while traveling across Canada. Alright, let's leave politics behind and talk about what was perhaps the greatest part of my journey across Canada, its natural beauty. Newfoundland proved to be the perfect place to begin, from the rugged coastline at Cape Spear, Canada's easternmost point, then across the island, and finally to one of Canada's greatest national treasures, Grossmore National Park. Whether it was hiking across the otherworldly tablelands or cruising through Western Brook Pond, Newfoundland offered some of the most spectacular scenery anywhere in the country. Crossing the Cabot Strait, I arrived in Nova Scotia. Driving the Cabot Trail, as the sun slowly set, was one of those experiences that stays with you long after the trip is over. The incredible coastal scenery along the Bay of Fundy, and the thick forests and serene rivers of New Brunswick, and the gentle scenery as I drove around charming Prince Edward Island. Entering Quebec, the drive around the Gaspé Peninsula was another highlight. Pierce Rock, Bonaventure Island, and the dramatic coastline along the Gulf of St. Lawrence made for an unforgettable journey before eventually giving way to the St. Lawrence River Valley. After several days exploring Canada's largest cities, I arrived at perhaps the country's most famous natural landmark, Niagara Falls. Yeah, it's surrounded by hotels, restaurants, and tourist attractions, but once you're standing beside the falls themselves, none of that really matters. The sheer power of nature is impossible to ignore, and just downstream, Niagara Glen offered another reminder of how beautiful this region really is. Leaving southern Ontario behind, I entered another world entirely, the Canadian Shield. Then came one of Canada's greatest geographic transformations. The forests slowly gave way to the open skies of the prairies. Then came the Rockies, the landscapes Canada is famous for around the world. Banff National Park more than lived up to its reputation. Moraine Lake, Johnson Canyon, and especially the Icefields Parkway towards Jasper contained the most breathtaking scenery I experienced anywhere in Canada. And somehow British Columbia just kept delivering. Yoho National Park, Takaka Falls, Emerald Lake, Glacier National Park, and finally the magical West Kootenays, a place that somehow still feels like one of Canada's best kept secrets. From there, Lake Okanagan. And finally, the ferry across the Strait of Georgia brought me to Vancouver Island, and my final destination, Tofino, the lush coastal rainforests, the wild Pacific beaches, and the crashing waves made it the perfect place to end my journey across Canada. There couldn't have been a better place to watch one final sunset as my trip came to an end. Looking back, there were so many things I loved about traveling across Canada. The food, the people, the cities, the small towns, the history, and the culture that makes this country unique. But more than anything else, it was Canada's natural beauty that left the biggest impression on me. And if there's one reason I'd encourage someone to travel across this country, is to experience those landscapes for yourself. Well, thanks for making it all the way to the end. My goal wasn't to tell you what to think about Canada, or to convince you that it's perfect, or that it's deeply flawed. It was simply to share what I saw, and hopefully help you understand the country just a little bit better. My perspective is a bit unusual. I grew up in Canada, then spent the next 20 years living overseas. So when I came back, I wasn't quite a local, and I wasn't quite a tourist either. Somewhere in between. And I think that helped me notice things I might have otherwise taken for granted. I hope it helped you see Canada from a different perspective too. If you enjoyed the video, I also made an entire travel series exploring many of the places featured here. From the start of my trip in beautiful St. John's, to a visit back to my hometown of Winnipeg, and plenty more along the way. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.